All right, fantastic. We're back for video number 3 on our conversation with semen retention and Ayurveda, and just naturally, it's gone into a very spiritual conversation. Um, if you guys haven't checked out the last couple videos, please do. There's some really great practical advice there, some really in-depth knowledge. And that was my goal with this interview series, is to bring some in-depth knowledge to make the whole no-fat movement a lot bigger than just, you can retain your semen and become more attractive to women and become more powerful and this type of thing, but actually look at some really deeper meanings and what's available to you in this human life, and maybe inspire some people to go further in their own spiritual path. And we've had Marshall with us, and Marshall lived 3 years as a brahmachari in the Hare Krishna order, and has been wonderful, bringing tremendous knowledge with us. So Marshall, welcome back.
Thank you, Nakula Prabhu.
You're very welcome. So let's just keep this conversation moving forward. Everybody knows to check out the links in the description below, for some free programs, and to check out the Patreon account if you like the content that's coming out on this channel. Marshall, so in the Vedic knowledge, it talks about, sex being kind of a reflection of what's higher. Sex in the material world being a reflection of sex in the spiritual world, or in the spiritual sense. Can you describe a little bit about what that means? Like what it means by that sex here is reflecting what's happening in the spiritual context?
Yeah, I mean, a topic like this needs a lot of like groundwork explanation. So, of course, we have everything we see around us in what we call the material world, the observable world, all the physical stuff that we experience and interact with from day-to-day life. We see quite a variety. We see all kinds of different types of matter and forms, and we have different animals, and we have different relationships also, and different emotions. And the one theory in philosophy is that all of this is coming from nothing. It's coming from a void, or it's coming from a oneness, a light, or something like that. And this is a very common philosophy nowadays. It's always been there. It's always been a common belief, because it's a very simple one to have, because you simply have, well, what is the opposite of all kinds of variety? Well, nothing, no variety.
Right.
So it's simply, you're taking that material means variety, and material means relationships and interactions and all kinds of experiences, and spiritual must mean the opposite of that. So it must mean nothing, or just like, undifferentiated energy or something like that. So that's a common conception of what spiritual is, and so you have images of yogis in the Himalaya who just sit and meditate on what's called Brahman, or the oneness behind everything, and that's it. That's
Right.
spiritual. But in the Vaishnav or the Bhakti tradition, spiritual means something completely different from that. This conception of the impersonalism, or that everything is coming from just a oneness, that is like going from, you have -1 in the material world, because I'm saying -1 because we have suffering, and we have all kinds of, everything's temporary, and so we're not fully satisfied all the time here.
Right.
So we're looking in spiritual life for how we can attain happiness that lasts forever, or that happiness that's even higher than what we're getting here. Otherwise, we wouldn't look for spiritual life.
That's right.
So a spiritual seeker is looking for something higher, more positive. So -1, the material world. Then you go to 0. So 0 is like the emptiness, or like the Brahman. But
Right.
in the Vaishnav conception, you have to go to +1. The opposite of -1 is +1, not 0. So
Right.
+1 means that spiritual, it means also variety. It means everything we see here is a reflection of the spiritual reality. And even philosophers like Plato described this kind of conception of an ideal prototype of something, that there must be an original form of everything that's perfect and
Right.
eternal, and it's a prototype, like a blueprint for this temporary world that the forms are based on. So it's a bit of a deep topic, but
Mm.
I just wanted to explain that first, because that the implication of that is that in the spiritual reality, the eternal reality, there is also all of the variegatedness, and there's relationship, and there's emotion there.
Mm.
So that that sets the stage for asking, well, if we have sex life here, then is there also sex life in God, or in the spiritual reality? And the answer would be yes, because it's here, it must be there.
Right.
So everything is coming from that same source, and therefore there is a form of sex life in the spiritual world, in the spiritual reality, but it's much different from what you find here, in the sense that sex life here is based on the body. It's based on often physical attraction. It's based on a desire for enjoying, pleasure of the senses, and often it leads to exploitation, unfortunately, and
Mm.
even between lovers, even between loved
Yes.
ones,
Subtle
unknowingly.
exploitation. Yeah.
Unknowingly, you think you're expressing love, which is the desire of the soul. The pure soul wants love, it wants relationship, but because we've forgotten the original form, then we're attracted to a reflection or an image, and that the real bliss of what we're looking for cannot be tasted there. And even the bliss that we taste is temporary, so it's not always satisfying. So that,
Mm.
just to finish here, is in the spiritual form of that is a pure loving exchange between two people, and it's not based on it's not like a business transaction. You scratch my back, I'll scratch
Right.
yours. Not based on exploitation, that I want what I want and I don't care what you want. And it's based on selfless, unconditional love. And so it's very beautiful in that sense.
Um, in the sense of when we speak of Krishna, I think one of the biggest misunderstood stories, and is these stories of Krishna with the gopi girls. And I think that those stories sometimes used to exploit sexually, right? Oh, this Krishna behaves in this way, so this is the man's role to behave in this way, right? This is the man's right to behave in this way. Can you speak a little bit about that misunderstanding and elevate us a bit in our thinking?
Yeah, I mean, for those who are aware of, a little bit about the gods of India and all this, Hinduism, and then people come across Krishna, who's a personality, and some people may think he's one of the, 33 million demigods, or he's like
Right.
just, you know, and but according to the Vedas, if you analyze, which the great teachers of the past have done in the Vaishnava tradition, we'll find that Krishna is actually the supreme God. And then we find his activities are very peculiar, in that he appears to be having uh, illicit relationships with, married women, and all of these things are going on. So someone with no guru or no teacher to explain these things may pick up a book, and may be written by anyone with any kind of qualification, and it can lead to a lot of confusion. But
Mm.
we have to understand properly that Krishna, in these activities, he's actually God himself. And the position of God, it means that he's the original living being, and that everything is his energy, including us. And
Right.
that's what, yeah, that's a principle of our Vaishnava philosophy, is that we're one of the energies of Krishna. That's why we enjoy service. That's why we engage in devotional services, because as a part of the whole, that's where we fit into the picture, and we're happiest when we're doing that. So these gopis, or these cowherd girls in the pastime of Krishna, they are also in the same position as they're the energy of Krishna, and the energy exists in order to give pleasure to the energetic or the source. So all of us are doing this to different degrees, knowingly or unknowingly. Everything is going on simply for the pleasure of the absolute truth. And we share in that pleasure in bhakti. That's the beauty, is that when we connect ourselves through yoga, yoga means connection, then we taste also what Krishna is tasting. And it's not comparable at all to anything we taste in the material world. The gopis are tasting the highest level of that kind of connection with Krishna, and their love is unconditional, like we explained, that unconditional love. So they give themselves fully to Krishna, knowing that Krishna is the proprietor or the enjoyer of everything. And so that's the kind of esoteric explanation which a lot of people don't get.
Well, I think because it's generally, like, if you look at the story, it's looked at as a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here's the physical boy Krishna playing with the with the physical girls, and they're seeing that some way like you would see a guy dancing with a bunch of girls in a club, right? Like they're sort of seeing it in that same sense. Right? Tell us how semen retention can help us grow spiritually, and what are the higher forms of semen retention that we can aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, that's another big topic, and it's in many spiritual cultures in the world, spiritual traditions, there is the practice of celibacy. We have it in the Christian tradition, we have it in the Buddhist tradition, we have it in all kinds of these paths of spiritual life or religion. And it's a practice for the understanding that it's to attain a higher cause. You know, you're sacrificing something lower to get something higher. So why would we do that? Well, materially speaking, from the position of Ayurveda, uh, as we touched on a little bit in the previous videos, so the semen contains ojas, or it leads to the cultivation of ojas. This is a fundamental uh, element in maintaining health in the living entity, but also because ojas leads to immunity and things like that in the body. Also, ojas and its constituents, prana and tejas, they lead to the development of higher states of consciousness. So this helps, on the subtle platform with our mind to develop stability of our emotions, clarity of our thoughts, focus, intelligence, retainance of memory. And so that's helping mentally and emotionally to stabilize us, which is very important in practicing spiritual life. If you want to be fixed, if you want to be consistent, determined. But then on a higher level, I mean, we're talking about abstinence and trying to negate the desire for sex life altogether, or to replace it with a higher desire for spiritual life, for service to Krishna, then the practice of semen retention and abstinence is helping us to transcend our identity with the body altogether. Because sex life is, by nature, it's grounded in material identification.
Right.
This is my body, I'm a male, and this
That's
is her body, she's a woman. And so it's based on the physical platform, so that's why we're saying, in a sense, it's a lower level of pleasure or desire. So spiritual life is based on the premise that I'm not the body, that I'm a soul, I'm different from the body, I'm eternal, and the body is temporary, it is a birth and death. So by trying to reduce our sex life, or trying to reduce the amount that we think about sex life or desire it, and replacing that with a more productive or higher goal in life, to attain pure devotion and love, and cultivate loving relationships with devotees and things like that, then that helps us to come out of this bodily platform, and we can eventually situate ourselves in the position that actually, yeah, I'm a soul, I'm eternal, and I don't have anything to do with these lower uh, things that I'm caught up in right now. And you start to come up a bit in your consciousness, and leave those things behind. So it's a gradual development of consciousness, but semen retention, abstinence, is directly essential to helping us to cultivate uh, disassociation with the body, which is a component of spiritual life. It's like the beginning of spiritual life.
Right.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's very important.
I think that from my own experience, practicing semen retention, also for myself, really developed my willpower, right? And my once the initial, like, I found at first my sexual thoughts were heightened.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talked about in a previous video, the samskars, the impressions, it's like they all got amplified as I retained my semen. I'm like, whoa, like, and it's like, wow. And then, so I think that there was like a bit of a swing there where it was like, I was preoccupied while I was retaining my semen. I was preoccupied with so much sex. Then over time, and I give thanks to the bhakti practice, because I don't think if the bhakti practice was part of my life that I would have necessarily got over this. But and I can't say I'm fully over this at all. But definitely the fever of all those impressions are so subdued, and I feel so free, and didn't realize how much I was being trapped by sexual thought, sexual activity. And I'm not a monk. I wouldn't put myself into a position of being a monk at this stage of my life, because I don't think that I just have way too much energy for that at this point, right? In my experience of it. But I definitely 100% feel the benefits of just letting that go and being free from that most of the time. And then being able to, and I actually feel when I do come together with my wife, Sarah, both physically and non-physically, there's a deeper relationship that's there, because I'm not just trying to exploit physically, because most sex, like as you said, is at a subtle level, even in a relationship, is an exploitation.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of our relationships, then we have to understand that there is a difference between affection and intimacy and sexuality, and that there are other ways of us expressing affection and intimacy in a relationship than just sex life. So we can explore other things like doing shared activities, and and as devotees doing service together, and there are so many nice things that we can do to show our affection and love for one another. Yeah, so that's
And
something that
I
is very important.
I see in many relationships, in modern relationships, most anyways that I've had interactions with, is actually what's missing is a friendship.
Mhm.
So there's a sex life, but the sex life runs dry. The sex life, the kids come into the picture, and there's no energy for sex life. Or there's anybody who's been in a long-term relationship will know that there's probably times where sex is more heightened. There's more passion. That type of energy is there, and then life is doing whatever it's doing. The bills are piling up, and there's no there's no desire there in that sense. Well, what I've noticed with many relationships that I've seen is that because they haven't developed intimacy on like shared activities, conversations, there's generally in modern families, there's no spiritual life. So
Mhm.
there's no that can bring a common activity, or at least a ease to the material fever. None of that's there. And so I find that there's a lot of misery within the homes of people. And that's why I feel like household life is so important at this age, in this time, because the very household life is miserable for many people.
Yeah, and that's a problem with the way we tend to come together nowadays and get married or get, most people also don't get married. It's based on mutual attraction. It's based sometimes even just on physical attraction or on a few things that we like. And but the
Mhm.
nature of the material world is that things change over time.
Right.
So people change, and uh, so if we're only liking them for a particular thing, their appearance even, well, we know what happens to our physical beauty over time.
It ain't gonna last.
So, and then of course, if it's based on sex life, and then sex life, it it also is not going to give the full satisfaction like lifelong. And so
That's
we
right.
need to find deeper things to root our relationship in. And when we have shared values, such as like as devotees, we have so many things in common, just from the common belief system and the common culture and sadhana and all these things are there. Uh, so that can be like an anchor or like a really strong connection that we can develop on. So you need to have like an emotional connection. It needs to go deeper. And like you said, it needs to evolve into more of a friendship or companionship. And you're two partners who are trying to achieve something. What is the goal of marriage? Why do people get into relationships, whether married or not? What are we looking for that this is such a common
Right.
practice that everyone does? So when we understand that where we're going, what is our goal as a couple, then we become more like partners in helping each other to attain that goal, whatever it is.
That's definitely it. I think that a lot of partners, relationships, there's a lot of suffering in them because some of these basic foundational things haven't been laid. A common goal. I think it generally becomes, I want this, you want this. I want this, you want this. And instead of a we, what is it that
Yeah.
we want? And there's great sacrifice in a relationship, right? Like I think it's a way to develop selflessness, because you have to, it can't be your way all the time. If it's your way all the time, then
Yeah.
someone's not going to
I
feel good about it, right?
I can say in Akula Prabhu that the Grihastha ashram is, I mean, the reason it's there is, if we're looking at the Vedic culture, like it's to get you to become a pure devotee. that's
Yeah,
that's where we're trying to do that by the end of life. We're trying to give up our attachments, and we're trying to give up this desire to control everything. And
yeah,
our false ego is basically what we're
that's right.
trying to deal with here. So if you don't deal with that as a brahmachari, like I didn't,
Right.
then when you get into the grihastha life, then you're going to learn really quick how to how to be humble, and how to develop a service attitude, and how
Yeah,
to uh, you know how to let go of trying to control everything. And so this is what it's for. It's here to purify us. It's here to help us to completely surrender. And so that's going to happen if we don't know why we're doing it. Still, it's gonna, the same principles are going to act, but we're gonna think, why am I not happy?
that's right.
Like, why? Because what we're doing is we're expecting our spouse or our partner to fulfill all of our needs,
Yes,
that they are the source of our happiness. And sometimes if they make me unhappy, that's not okay. And that something must be wrong. And so I'll get rid of that partner, I'll get another partner, and they're going to make me happy. But people go through many marriages because they don't understand that getting married, this is a quote I heard from, this is from a book, like a manual on grihastha life, on householder life and
mm,
principles. But there was someone, a specialist in marriage, said like, marriage means that you're married. It doesn't mean that you're happy. In other
right.
words, we're getting married to get married, right? Because there's a certain purpose behind that. We're not getting married because that's going to, that's going to be the cause of all of our happiness. And we have to accept that it's okay sometimes if we disagree on things, or if we have some kind of conflict, as long as we resolve it. Because I was just hearing, even astrologically, a lot of couples get their astrology done, their
Hmm.
compatibility, to see like what areas are we compatible, what areas are we incompatible, what percentage of compatibility do we have? Is it 0%?
Yeah, this is zero.
And the interesting fact is that the highest level of compatibility you can get is 92%.
Mm,
You can't have 100% compatibility in this world with anyone, and that
right,
8% is there because you must argue sometimes. And
right.
that's where the most development's going to happen, not in
Yeah,
the arguments, but in your resolving the
that's right.
conflicts and how you work it out, your differences. So you can't have perfect compatibility. It's not going to be perfect all the time. That's not what this ashram or this situation is for.
and and it's so important to acknowledge that. Like, one of the things I know with myself and Sarah said, like, we're going to disagree. There's, like, we've accepted that we're going to have different thoughts and perceptions about things, because that is the nature of this world. And I think the more that couples understand that, then naturally when there is some disagreement, you accept it as like, oh, okay, these are one of these things that we're just going to see a bit differently, and or we're going to see completely differently, or whatever it is, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But there's a deeper love than the material perception. You understand, there's a common understanding in a relationship like that, that is like, that's fine, and it's fine that that's that way, and that's going to be, it's especially, man, woman, we're different, we're literally going to see things differently, right? And so
Yeah.
that's okay, because at the level of the soul, we're the same, and we're connected, and we have a deeper relationship and deeper connection than just on the physical level. And that's something that I hope that, I really hope that people take to spiritual life seriously in household life, because it's something that in their relationship they're going to be able to experience that I didn't get to experience until I came to spiritual life, and then and started really understanding, like, accepting oneness and difference at the same time.
Yeah. And if I can refer back to the pastimes of Krishna,
Hmm.
so we have Rukmini is one of the queens of Dwarka. She's a wife of Krishna, and she's saying like, you know, that I accepted you. Yeah, in other words, if someone doesn't know the glories of you, of Krishna, and how perfect you are, and how much you can satisfy everyone, uh, then maybe they would consider having an ordinary man as their husband. But because I know, like, because I know you, uh, I cannot settle for having like a bag of bones and blood as my husband. So she's desiring, she's praying that I want Krishna as my husband. So this is very significant. This is she's saying basically that she knows that only Krishna can satisfy her fully. Now Krishna, being God, he's perfect. He's complete. He has relationships with everyone, and he can please everyone 100%. But souls in the bodies in this material world interacting with one another, you have a soul in a male body and a soul in a female body, and they're interacting. But because both of them are not perfect like God, then they cannot fully satisfy one another. Each of them can only be pleased with their relationship with Krishna. So then you
That's
have
right.
this pyramid, right? Then you have husband and wife, and you have God on the top. And to the degree that you're both close to God, then you're closer to each other,
That's right.
right? So that's the important principle, is that we're not depending on one another to be our source of happiness and fulfillment. We have something else that we're both looking towards. And if we're both looking towards the same thing, then we're going together. We're progressing together. But if we're both looking at each other to be that, then that's very limited, you know. So we have to look towards Krishna,
Yeah.
and that's the secret to maintaining a healthy relationship, whether it's a marriage or even friendships as devotees, or any kind
We,
of
yeah.
relationship.
Ultimately, we have to learn, like, to become satisfied with our relationship, like, well, get into the most satisfactory relationship with which is the relationship with God. and then we become satisfied. So therefore we don't have to exploit, or we don't have to look for anybody else to be the source of anything for us. Right. And I think that's the beauty of what people can learn in family life, is that if you can achieve such a relationship with Krishna in family life, then even your family life becomes even better. Right. And that's, there's a story, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but basically there was a very beautiful daughter, and men would come over all the time to convince the father, please let me marry the daughter. So, the one guy said, he came to the father, said, oh, I love your daughter, or I would like to marry your daughter. And he said, who will you love the most in your life? And the first guy said, your daughter. And the father said, no, you can't marry my daughter. He comes around, so the second guy comes around, says, oh, please, your daughter's so beautiful, I want to marry her. And his father says, who will you love the most in your life? And the guy says, oh, your daughter. I said, no, you can't marry my daughter. And the third guy comes around and says something like, your daughter's so beautiful, I want to marry your daughter. The father says, who will you love the most in your life? And the man says, I love God the most, and then I'll treat your daughter very well. And he said, okay, you can marry my daughter.
That's very nice.
Because the father understood that a man who loves God, that love will extend to his daughter. But a man who can't love God, he can't extend anything. He's not gonna. He doesn't want his daughter for anything but his own exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Prabhupada talked about that. He said that
I might have heard it from Prabhupada, but I can't remember where I heard that story.
Well, no, he said love, it's like, when you throw a rock in a pond and it creates a ripple effect, the ripples kind of slowly flow outwards from where the rock was thrown to the shore of the pond. So he said love is like that. People have love for their partner, or they have love for their family, or a little bit more, they have love for their community, or they have love for their nation. Like some people go to war just fighting for their country because they have love for America or for Canada. And then if you go further, you have love for the world. But then if you go, like the ripples go to the end of the pond, that's love for God. And if you have love for God, that contains all of the smaller spheres of love. So that when you develop love for God, that spills over, like you said, it fills all of your other relationships. They become deeper. And so that's what we all have to focus on. We have to be partners, we have to be friends long term, and we have to see like where we're going. Why are we in this situation? Why are we married? Why are we together? And when you have that common goal and you both understand, like it goes very deep, and that's the real purpose of that union, right?
Yeah.
And if I can just share a nice quote from Chanakya Pandit.
Please do.
Chanakya Pandit was a great scholar that Prabhupada also appreciated very much. And he said, one should feel satisfied with three things. He said, one's own wife or partner, food that is acquired from providence. In other words, whatever food you can obtain, you should be satisfied. And wealth which is acquired by an honest effort. So that means we're not working too hard. We're not overworking ourselves, and we're just doing what we need to be satisfied. So whatever comes, we should be satisfied with those things. The partner I have, not looking for someone else, not complaining about them, accept them as they are, be satisfied. Work with what you have. And the food and money that you acquire, be satisfied also. If you want more and more, you're never going to be happy. But there are three things that we should not be satisfied with. And that is studying of the scriptures, or learning and cultivating knowledge. We should never be satisfied. We should always want to know more. The chanting of the holy name, japa, as you were talking about on Sunday. And so we should never be satisfied with the holy name. And charity, giving and charity to others. We should never be satisfied with how much we contribute to our community. And So that's a very nice standard that Chanakya Pandit is setting, particularly for a grihasta, for a
Mm.
householder. And so that's very, I think, significant. It's an important quality to be satisfied in our situation, not to think we deserve more. We're given what we deserve, and we have to be happy with that. If we are, then we can move forward. We don't have to think like there are so many things in this material world that I haven't accomplished, or there are so many things that so many desires unfulfilled. And when your mind is peaceful like that, then you can really focus on spiritual life,
Yeah.
you know. So
Well, I
I just
find that
wanted to share that.
yeah, I find in that state of self-satisfaction, you actually in return are more productive and useful, because I know from my own experience when I'm haunted by endless desires, and I inherently know that all those desires will never be fulfilled. How could they? Like there's just not enough time and and energy in me to disperse into all these million things that I possibly want to do. And right away I feel dissatisfied in my life. I'm like, oh, and then when I, wake back up and be like, oh yeah, like, put my trust in Krishna, then I feel satisfied and I'm not hankering. And then whatever's in front of me, I feel like I can interact with it in a deeper way, in a way that brings more quality, which actually makes it more successful. So it's like, the reflection in Maya is always lying, right?
Yeah,
Which is
this
very good
world,
though.
this world is designed so that there's always someone better than you at something.
Yeah.
There's always someone richer than you. There's always someone more beautiful, more famous, stronger. There's always going to be someone that's above you.
Yeah.
And in the ultimate sense, even if you're at the top in this world, I mean, God is far above you. so, and then even if we acquire all the wealth in the world, we lose it at the time of death. So
That's right.
that this world is designed to, uh, you know, to destroy our pride and destroy our attachments. It's just meant for that.
Yeah.
And the more we understand why we're here, what we're here to learn, then we're not going to be upset when someone's more successful than us. We're going to think, wow, like, congratulations.
Yeah.
And you're going to be cheering them on. And like, if a devotee is more advanced than you're not going to think like, oh, well, he did this in the past or whatever. And you're going to think like, I'm so happy to see how this devotee is progressing. Uh, so when you realize like there's no shortage of these qualities in the world, you can also become pure yourself, and you know so there's no shortage. It's all Krishna's unlimited energies.
Oh,
We
love
have
it,
to
man.
learn to be satisfied.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think we'll end off our three-part series there. Thank you for those who stuck it out for 3 parts. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm assuming if you've watched it to this point, you've enjoyed it. If not, why would you still be here? So I do really appreciate you, taking in the knowledge and, hanging out with us. Please do visit the description below the video. Sign up for the free ejaculation course. You can find up also for Nakula Das Ministries, where I'm going to be doing live streams every Sunday of Krishna Consciousness principles and activities, so you can learn more about Krishna Consciousness, the path of Bhakti Yoga, and how it's transforming our society and how it'll transform your life. Marshall, thank you once again for spending this time and sharing this time with us. Really appreciate it.
Hare Krishna. Thank you
Hare
for the
Krishna.
opportunity.